Are you ready to live more authentically and explore who you truly are? Would you love to know how to get there? Hi, I am Jamie Graham Duprey, teacher, author, coach, and host of The Second Half. Throughout the show, we will consider how we can be people who show up honestly, speaking in truth and love, and vulnerably, sharing and reflecting on life experiences. You will be encouraged to make connections in your life that will dare you to explore powerful growth, personally, vocationally, and spiritually. Are you ready to consider how to develop and nurture a growth mindset, take ownership of your life, and create action steps that lead you to being bold, brave, and healthy? The second half starts now. Good morning and welcome to the second half. I am Jamie Graham Duprey, your host, and I'm here with my spouse, Jeremy, who has been a guest several times. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, thanks for being here. It's pretty crazy. We don't get to touch base all that often during the week. We have 3 kids, one in high school, one in middle school, one in elementary school. My spouse is a pastor at a church. I am a director of a camp ministry and several things in between. So oftentimes we feel like we are ships passing. It was good for me to listen to the opener of this show that I recorded several months back to recenter. And uh, today we are going to talk about some prayer practices. This show, I decided to focus on the second half of life, second half life living, which basically means as we get to a certain age or stage, we have the capacity and opportunity and ability to consider ways we want to continue to grow, not in the same way that we watch our children grow, not getting any taller, hopefully not any wider, but just deeper and becoming the people that we want to show up as more often. So Jeremy and I was trying to recap. We've talked about parenting. We've talked about the word success, the word winning. I've had guests on here where we've reflected on life lessons learned through sports because we like that analogy of how there is a first half and a second half in most sporting events and how that's applicable. Jeremy, what else? What have you learned or what do you think about when you reflect on these podcast shows over the last 6 months?
Your most recent one with Peter, talking about just life and relationship with having adult friends. And I remember the conversation with Rosella about power. You had a good conversation around the word power and how you understand that and how you use it in your life, the two of you. So those are the two that kind of come to mind first.
Yes, we've had a lot of broad topics, and the beauty is with that, it's something we can talk about once, and then it's often tip of the iceberg, and it offers space for more conversation and wondering about that, which has been a gift to me. This is something I've never done before. I'm not really a podcast listener. I listen to audiobooks or music, or I'd rather read transcripts and things like that. But this has really pushed me out of my comfort zone, which is something I encourage my coaching clients to do, my own children, and I would like to practice what I preach. So this has been really good growth.
Mm-hmm.
To this morning, I was thinking about our topic that we landed on last night as we were each coming home from work and quickly touching base on who was taking which child where at what time, as Jeremy needs to head out of town for a couple of days to help his mom. And we talked about the word examen, spelled Examen. And Jeremy has been prepping our family and our congregation for the Lenten season that's coming up that begins next Wednesday, March 5th, with Ash Wednesday. And the Lenten season is a 40-day period that starts right after Fat Tuesday on Ash Wednesday and leads us into the season of Easter, of resurrection, of rejoicing. And it's a time where we can consider disciplines and maybe prayer practices. Maybe we take some things out the word examine is a lot like the English word examine. So that's what we decided to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want me to describe that practice, or
Yes, before I was just also this morning we did get to sit down for a quick half cup of coffee together, and we got in an argument, and and then I was reflecting on the other things I needed to get done today, knowing Jeremy's leaving town, having this podcast to record, getting ready for work myself, thinking about what our kids need, and just other relationships and things on my mind. And I thought, the more I think I can handle everything or help everybody or manage and figure out every conflict and every relationship and every situation and every struggle, the more I realize how very weak I am.
Mm. Okay. What else do you want to say about that?
Yes, which I think is appropriate as we recenter ourselves intentionally during this time to talk about ways to show up as second half life livers. It's not something that we age into and suddenly I'll be 41 next month. It's not like, okay, I'm 41. Now I'm a second half life liver and I'm going to be able to be more mature and disciplined and show up in these really great ways every day, all the time. It's something that we need to constantly work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that might be a good transition into the practice of the examen itself. This is a spiritual prayer practice that was um, started by Saint Ignatius, and when he was writing his sort of instructions for what the participants in his faith community were going to do as their spiritual leader, this was one of the things that he for them, they would have agreed to do, like as a requirement in their life. Like they were going to do this particular spiritual prayer practice every day. Mm-hmm. And a part of the practice is just looking back onto our days, into our life that we've experienced in the last 24 or 12 hours, and naming the parts of our lives that filled us up, gave us energy, made us happy, the times in our lives where we felt connected to God or with other people. And he used the word consolation to describe that. So, so looking back on your day and saying, "Oh, it was at this moment that I felt most filled up." And then the other part of that practice is looking back on your day and naming when you felt most drained or most disconnected, when you felt desolated, actually. And that's the desolation is the word that goes along with consolation. So we're looking at the practice helps us look back at our days and name the desolations and then also the consolations. And in doing so, we get to name a lot of things, and hopefully the practice leads to a lot of gratefulness for the consolations, and also a release or a handing over to God, an acceptance really of the desolation. Mm-hmm. I think that is one of the challenges of this practice for many people. I know it has been for me. Sometimes when I look back on my day, I would recognize where I, in quotes, messed up. And then I would just beat myself up about it. Mm-hmm. Like, this practice did not help me at first because I was just really upset that I had messed up. I think the practice really wants us to name when we felt drained or when we felt disconnected, and then hand that over or entrust that to a higher power, to God, and then be able to then move forward into the day, into the next day, with that acceptance, and then doing our best to stay connected to God and others, and then you just kind of repeat the process.
Yeah. I like that. Thinking of we did this with our kids the other night, and our daughter said, "Yeah, that kind of sounds like checking in with highs and lows," and she's right. So language, consolation and desolation might bring up a depth to that, but it can be as simple or complex as
Mm-hmm.
we want it to be. But the point is that we are taking time to examine who we are, who we, who God created us to be, and how we want to accept that. And there are things that we won't like about ourselves or our actions and the way we show up. Um, that's that's because we're human.
Mm-hmm.
However, then what are we going to do about it next? The hope is that we, of course, take a step forward and try to show up in that big way, which is super uncomfortable. Self growth, all of these things that we talk about when we are considering what being a second half life liver, I would argue is pretty darn uncomfortable, which is, I think, a big reason we often stay in the status quo. Maybe that means staying in a job you don't really love or even like, or patterns that are unhealthy for you. It's just we have a lazy binary lizard brain,
Mm-hmm.
so it's almost seems harder than to just actually uh, focus on the real depth of all that we are, which includes so many things, good, bad, and in between. It's not dualistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we use Enneagram language a lot, Jeremy and I do, and we use other sociological terms that, like I said before, just having language around things really helps me understand something, and it helps us have conversations with shared understandings, even when we get in arguments. And I think, like this morning when that happened, which doesn't happen very often between us, it just, as I said before, reminded me of my weakness and the reality that even you, Jeremy, as my partner in life, my chosen partner, that, my favorite person that I want to be with the most every day living life, like we're still going to disagree. There are still parts and pieces of us that are going to clash and not be in full harmony all the time. And I think the word acceptance just keeps coming to my mind. Like, yeah, okay. And it doesn't mean I'm going to give up or um, turn my back on you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to deepen that. So as we think about this examine practice, and we talk about it a little more after we take a break here, um, I just wanted to name that, and maybe you have one more thing to add before we take a little halftime break.
Yeah, it would be really great to discuss, maybe in this next half of the show, Richard Rohr's
Hmm.
encouragement in his book "Falling Upward,"
Hmm.
um, and how that might connect to one's practice of examining one's day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. We will talk about this examine practice and other considerations of prayer practices before uh, uh, or after the break. So grab a drink or take a stretch, and we will see you in a couple minutes on the second half of the second half. Good morning. Welcome back to the second half of the second half. I'm Jamie Graham Duprey. I'm here with my spouse, Jeremy, and we are talking about the Lenten season approaching. In our faith tradition, we recognize and observe the season of Lent, which is the 40 days before Easter that starts with Ash Wednesday next week. And Jeremy has been encouraging our family and our congregation to consider different ways to examine our lives. And for the theme of this podcast, considering how to show up in life more intentionally, to continue to grow, to look at ourselves and how we show up in our thoughts, actions, and words, and think about what we want to focus more on, maybe shed, and just be able to delve into some of those tough conversations or situations and reflect on them, because we know that such good growth can come from that. So, Jeremy, maybe if you could talk a little bit about a little more, like you said, this examine prayer practice, and a book that we refer to a lot is called Falling Upward.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. You named earlier in the show just about the times that you're accepting the failure or not accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish, maybe missing the mark on certain things. And that is one of the things that the Examen prayer practice helps us do. The connection to second half living that I am making in my own mind is that with what Richard Rohr writes about in his book Falling Upward. He names that in second half living, our falling, like falling down and messing up or whatever, is
failure, maybe.
Failure is where we grow. Like that's how we fall up. We move upward in naming those things, embracing them, and then growing from them. And so it's an interesting sort of paradox to appreciate and seek out your falling. Like, I failed today. Yay, good for me. Because in the second half living, there's an acceptance of that as our growth. And so that's, you don't want to celebrate missing the mark or falling, but and I certainly wouldn't want to do it on purpose.
Right.
But I do recognize like that's where we grow the most.
That's what I was thinking. It's a when, not an if. And I think when we understand that, it's not that we go out and try to do a poor job of XYZ. It's not like we intentionally try to hurt somebody that we love or care about, or we're flippant with our words and uncaring. It's quite the opposite. And when we mess up, because we do and we will, how do we acknowledge that and accept it, like I've heard you say a few times, and then be able to grow from it or learn from it, and somehow, just like we encourage our kiddos to. And that word capacity, I've talked about that a lot, comes to mind. I do believe that if we allow it, just kind of allow ourselves to sit in some of the yuck, the feelings that, maybe our gut feeling is just off. We know something's off. We're not proud of ourselves. Maybe that it manifests through anger, frustration, all those different emotions that can be a trigger to us that something deeper is going on there. And if we're willing to just find out what that is, we can name it and then again move on instead. And what's the alternative here? I think of shame, guilt, regret, and maybe blame. What comes to mind for you when we aren't willing to uncross our arms or honor that we messed up, and we will continue to do that?
Yeah. Well, the alternative would be to not grow. One alternative would be to not grow because we were trying to pretend that we didn't mess up. I think that's a huge part of what Lent actually encourages us to do. On Ash Wednesday, we are reminded that we are sinners. And my definition of sin that I work from first is that we missed the mark. There is this desired hope, and we just didn't hit it. And if we pretend that we hit it every single time, then we're just fooling ourselves and not accepting, and then not growing from that either, and just sort of like living life undeveloped, really, or underdeveloped, maybe. I think that is the initial desire for our ego selves.
Yeah.
Like it wants to protect our reputation or any of our actions, any of our words by justifying what we had done.
Yeah.
Instead of allowing the ego to take a step to the side and allowing our true selves to say, oh, wow, I really messed up here. And I want to learn from this.
Right.
So, and Lent is beautiful in that.
Yep. And over the last summer, Jeremy preached I don't know why our video just popped off. over the summer, you talked a lot about the sunflower, the analogy of watching a sunflower grow and how it follows the sun. It orients itself constantly to the sun, and encouraging us as humans to consider how we orient and reorient ourselves to God. And that's what I'm hearing when you talk about how you look at the word sin and what that means or looks like. And I will also add that I know um, we talk about that disconnect. You've used that word today, being disconnected from God. To me, that's the worst thing. So, and that's what sin does. So, how can we reorient ourselves so that we are at least trying our best to stay connected? I would argue God is always connecting and connected to us. We're the weak ones that have that need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a difficult season. It's a beautiful season.
Lent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the part of the idea behind it is to simplify one's life in order to have a little more time to focus and to do that orientation work. But it could also mean simplifying your life a bit so that you can kind of wrestle with the failing or wrestle with the sin, entrust it to God, and then accept God's love for us, despite missing the mark, despite not living up to our true selves. So,
right. And so, encouragement within our family, something that you've been encouraging us to think through is when Lent does start next week, whether or not that's something that you traditionally observe in your faith or in your life. Maybe just think about how an encouragement from our conversation today is, what is one thing in your life that you'd like to take a deeper look at, or one tendency, or something that maybe you struggle with, or something that maybe you love and wish you could focus on more. Our 11-year-old the other day said, "I'm giving up pop for Lent," and Jeremy sort of said, "Okay, how much pop do you really drink? How difficult will that be for you?" And it's not that it's bad or wrong. It's just intention and motivation behind maybe something we do. Maybe that's, I'm going to take 5 minutes every day to listen to music that really calms me and centers me. Or I'm going to wake up and write 3 different things in my journal that I am specifically grateful, and I can't have anything repeated for those 40 days. Or maybe it is a discipline of cutting back on something like something that kind of grasps you in, that you can see being an addiction on some side of the spectrum. Maybe that's sugar. Maybe that's responding to emails constantly, something like that.
Yeah.
So as we finish up today, I just want to encourage people to wonder about, what are some ways in my life that I can take some time to examine and to consider my consolations or desolations, maybe add a prayer practice, maybe cut out something that's not serving me well, and then just be willing to sit in that and reflect on that and just notice without judgment. Final thoughts and encouragement from you, Jeremy?
Just if you want to learn more about the Examen, there's a great short book called Eating with Bread that we've really enjoyed reading. And so that would be something I would point you to if you want to learn more.
Yeah, and thanks so much for listening. I'm always available. I don't know if I always say that on this, but I have a website, coachdupre.com. I have a couple memoirs. One has a Bible study attached to it. I have coaching clients myself. I love to connect with people to offer that space to do some of this good, hard work that offers the opportunity to grow into second half living. Thanks for showing up, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you for listening to The Second Half with me, Coach Duprey. Tune in on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio, where you will be encouraged to make connections in your life that will dare you to explore powerful growth personally, vocationally, and spiritually. For more information about me, my courses, my coaching, and my books, and how I can support you on your journey, find me on my website, coachdupre.com. See you next time.